We all contain magic. The question is, how do you contain your magic?
It connects you to one. Hold the hand of bliss once more until the story's done.
Containing your magic isn't about holding back. It's about holding space for vitality, creativity, and alchemy. It's about learning to nurture what fuels you and to release what no longer serves you. So there's more room for you to be you. Your magic is only as powerful as your ability to hold it, to focus it, and to own it. Through conversations, stories, and reflections, this podcast delves into mind-body wisdom, yoga, somatic practices, and self-care as pathways for deep, lasting transformation. Each episode is an invitation to tune in to the pulse of your own magic, to trust it, to honor it, and let it move through you in ways that heal, create, and ignite your fire without burning out. I'm your host, Sonia Baillon. I'm a transformational coach, yoga educator, singer, and embodied alchemist. Mind-body wisdom, intuition, freedom, creative expression, love, and joy are my guides. Sprinkle that with a dose of healthy discipline, and you've got my magic recipe for success. I'm here with you today to share the stories, the practices, and the awakenings that truly contain her magic. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this first episode of Contain Her Magic. My name is Sonia, and I'm really grateful to be with you here today to share in the story of what prompted me to create this podcast and to tell you a little bit about what containing her magic means. This is a podcast for women who are ready to rekindle their spark and embody their creative fire, to reclaim their light, but without burning out. So, in today's episode, we're going to get into all that good stuff and look at the tools, the practical magic that we use in order to stay strong and be inspired and keep that fire burning. I'll share my guiding principle as a transformational coach and take a look into how our beliefs shape who we are and how to be in the flow with this magical witchy season. We'll wrap it all up with a nice embodied practice for visualizing the things in your life that you want to manifest, for bringing into reality your deepest desires. So let's throw all that into the cauldron and get the conversation bubbling. Let's rekindle that spark. And truly, the best way for me to do that, to get into this topic of rekindling your spark and containing your magic and what it is to have a container to put that magic in, is to tell you my story. And I have a feeling that if you're here with me today, then maybe it's because my story isn't so dissimilar from yours. So when I was a kid, I loved the performing arts. I loved singing, dancing, and acting. I mean, these were some of my favorite pastimes from a very young age. Also, writing was very special to me. I think I wrote my first book, if you want to call it that, when I was about 5 years old. As soon as I could put my pencil to paper, I was writing. And I was never very good at drawing, so I always preferred to paint pictures with my words. Creative expression really is an integral part of who I am, but as women, it is an integral part. Our creative capacity. Men obviously are creative as well, but in women, we create in ways that are so unique and so powerful because we create life itself. Yeah, men give us a hand, but we embody that life sustaining and creating process, and then we offer it out to the world. So, in a way, this idea of women's creativity is very much linked to the idea of creation as a whole and sustaining that creative force, which is, in fact, our life force. So I segue a little bit in that away from my story, but I think it's really important to describe that to you because it's truly how I feel. And it's part of what has prompted me to create this podcast and share these things with you. So back to my story. I channel a lot of my creativity at the moment through the performing arts, but particularly in singing. So I'm a singer. I haven't always been. I came to it a little later. So in my 30s, yeah, I would say just after my children were born, when they were old enough to be able to take hours away from mommy. So my son was 3 when I started going to some open mic nights and putting myself out there. And sure enough, I made some musical friends who invited me to go and play with them and to sing with them on a casual basis that led to me now being part of several musical projects that bring me a lot of joy. And I hope other people too. But, the funny thing is, actually, is that when I was younger, I didn't really think I could sing. So that's a talent that came later on with a bit of self-reflection and confidence, but also just because I love to sing. Sometimes we have a talent that we're called to or creative project that we wanna do, but we don't feel like we've got the skill to necessarily do it. But sometimes that's just a little inside voice saying there's some fear around taking it to the next level. But I think the point here is that somewhere between childhood and adulthood, I'd lost my voice. And really, that was a representation of having lost a little bit of myself. You know, as humans, our creative ability has helped us to advance in a lot of ways, right? Not just socially and culturally, but also from an evolutionary perspective. We're quite literally the product of our instinct to survive and to procreate, as I mentioned. And as women, we carry this creative potential within us and we're designed to give life to it. Just as we have a natural tendency to nurture and care for others, many of us carry within us an urge to feed our own creativity and to birth our ambitions. And, that takes some energy, which is why it was that at the time when I started doing my yoga teacher training, that I started to find my voice again and I was able to put myself out there and to sing. And of course, there was also the timing in my life, as I mentioned, where I'd had children and I was very much involved in that creative process and caregiving. And so that was the right time to do that. Everything has its time. And I started as soon as it was possible for me and that I felt right about it to reinvest in myself. Now, I left something out in my previous description of having lost my voice. I said, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, I'd lost a bit of myself. And I want to elaborate on that because I think it is also an example of what a lot of people do go through. And perhaps you can relate to this. If you've had any kind of deep emotional experience or trauma, you cut yourself off from things and it's a way to survive. So these again, this idea of creativity and survival overlap because it's just the human nature. There are times in our lives when the only thing that we can focus on is survival. And that is an extremely good quality and strength. And that's the reason why we're here today. You are where you're at today because of your ability to be resilient and to survive. And if you find yourself today in a place where you'd like to make some changes, then welcome to the club. Most of us are there, even if from the outside perspective, some people seem to have it all together and everything goes their way. For the most part, that's not true. Even people who have success in some areas of their life find themselves lacking or wanting in others. And beyond that, it's extremely healthy and uplifting to have a desire to change and to grow and to be the best that you can be. So, right, back to emotional stuff. So, what happened to me was when I was 19 years old, I lost my dad. And my dad was my person, my love of my life at that time. And it was really difficult for me. So, a lot of my natural um, enthusiasm and spark left me at that time because I had to focus on the important task of just putting one foot in front of the other every day, step by step, trying to keep it together, trying to get through school. At the time, I was in university, and that was it, And of course, at that age, I did a lot of escapism, a lot of partying, a lot of forget about it for now and come back to it and bawl my eyes out later. So that was a difficult time, and I've grown a lot from it. But of course, there are still moments that creep in where I just still miss him terribly. And this we're talking about, 30 plus years later. And that's okay because the experience that I had shaped me. It was painful, but I owe it a lot of gratitude in the sense that I learned very early on not to take things for granted. And I learned very early on that love was so important in our relationships. I wasn't always able to act on it or embody it, but the lesson had been installed, the seed had been planted. And over time, and with personal growth and yoga practice and all kinds of coaches and meditative practices, I've managed to integrate a lot more of that teaching. And again, I'm very grateful for that. So, in that process, though, the energy that I would have put into being free and open and creative wasn't really available to me. And then life happens. I had a family of my own. You have to work and do different things, and I became a teacher. So, without a teaching degree, but I, with my communications degree, was able to get some work, and I enjoyed that because it was convenient for me. It was the same schedule as my kids, local work, pay was all right. And, I do like to teach. In fact, I love to teach. And that is what that experience taught me. I hadn't really ever thought about being a teacher. And when I had the opportunity, I took it, and it taught me a lot about myself in the end. So, to continue teaching, but teaching in a realm that meant more to me, I began teaching yoga. Now, that happened kind of spontaneously. I was at a point in my life where I realized after having dealt with, that the grieving process, getting through school, having a family, having kids, several years, decade or so in, I started to notice in my body some physical symptoms, some things that I didn't quite like, obvious postpartum weight gain, and my blood pressure was creeping up a bit, and just generally starting to not recognize myself as me. My container, if you will, my body container wasn't reflecting the energy that I knew that I had inside of me. So I started going to yoga class, and I went to a local yoga center here that I ended up teaching at a few years afterwards. But I went to a class, and at the end of the class, the teacher came up to me and said, "Wow, you're really flexible and you flow easily into the postures. Have you ever considered being a yoga teacher?" And at that moment, I hadn't. But then I did. I went back home and I thought about it, and I said, "You know what? That really is a pretty good idea." So I followed through with it. When I was a kid, the other thing that I hadn't mentioned that I was also into was gymnastics. So I've always been comfortable with movement and moving my body, and it was a natural progression for me then to go into teaching yoga. So as I was taking my yoga teacher training, obviously, you learn postures and breathing and it start to regulate your nervous system, but there's also a more esoteric side. And my training is in classical hatha yoga. And during that time, we also did a lot of chakra work, a lot of energy work. And that energy work was very powerful for me in that having settled my nervous system and started shifting my energies and building a stronger body container, I was able to recognize this desire in me to sing again. So it was in the self reflection that my yoga practice brought me that I was able to move forward with this desire. So I reignited my spark through the yoga. And I noticed also the writing coming in. At that point, I was writing songs, writing lyrics. And I had years ago, before my father passed away, and I did for a little while after as well, but I was writing poetry. So it was easy for me to flow into writing lyrics. And it fulfilled a need for me to express myself that I had put aside because of this need to focus on things that were a little more practical for a certain time in my life. And that brings up another point because, sometimes when we are adolescents and we have to make choices in life and we choose to do this or to do that, we're in some cases, we have, influences in our lives, our parental influences, friends, school, whatever, that will guide us to follow our dreams and to do whatever our heart desires. And in other cases, that isn't so. We are more led or guided into practical considerations of making money and stability and does all this make sense? So that's another discussion for another time, but certainly it is part of what may encourage or interrupt your creative flow. So that's something to consider if you've had experiences like that in your life. It's not always having a massively traumatic experience or, an emotional disturbance that cuts off the flow. Sometimes it's a small trickle of influence or disbelief or negativity or disapproval. Ooh, that's a big one too. That creep in and go unnoticed. And then in time, though, it's just like a little trickle of water. It can go deep. There can be a fairly deep trench, even though the river's not very wide. It's deep and it's in the background and it's harder to notice. It's more subtle. So that's something to maybe pay attention to as well if you feel like you've been cut off from your creative flow. It's not always what's most obvious, and that's why doing some personal reflection and cultivating self awareness and self care is so important because it leads us into these realizations. In my case, the yoga, as I mentioned, was liberating, and I was able to get back into it. And it brings me an awful lot of joy today to continue to sing. But I also am growing in that I want to do more of this, right? So I started this podcast because this is another creative expression for me. So using my voice in a different way to be able to talk and also to teach, but also to listen. I'm so looking forward to having inspiring guests on this podcast. And I'll be interviewing a very special woman this week for the next episode. And I'll tell you more about that at the end of this one. So, if my story makes you feel as though you've lived something similar, then I would really encourage you to share in the comments as well, because I would like for this podcast to be a community of sharing of for women who have similar experiences and who are there to support each other and to inspire each other and uplift each other. And when you're in a community of people that help to support that positive energy, this is something that can really help you to move forward. A lot of times we have ideas to do all kinds of great projects, but we don't find the time. We're too busy tending to other people's needs, or we just get caught up in, the daily grind and the basics of life to be able to really just stop and offer ourselves some time to invest in ourselves. And this podcast also, I'm hoping, is a way for you, even if you're doing your housework and plugged into the podcast, that's fine. I do it all the time. But just a way for you to feed yourself, to fuel yourself with the good stuff that's going to help you to move forward and to feel like yourself again. Because we get lost along the way sometimes. And that's what happened to me. I started finding myself being conflicted between duty and desire, thinking I want to do this or that, or I want to be able to be a different kind of person, but finding the constraints of my everyday life to be challenging to break free from, where you feel a little bit guilty for thinking, ooh, I'd like to go and take half an hour to do this for myself, or, just sit and meditate, or go to a yoga class, or whatever it is. Maybe it's sit around and read a book, drink a cup of tea, go for a walk. That's also a very good one. But, just this idea that we have responsibilities towards others before we have towards ourselves is lovely, but flawed because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And that's what this whole idea of containing your magic is all about. It's about filling your cup. It's about fixing the leaks in that cup, or I'd like to call it your cauldron. Halloween is just around the corner at the time when I'm recording this. Halloween is at the end of the week. And so ideas of witches and cauldrons and magic abound. And I'm certainly going to touch on that again before the end of this episode. But in essence, the idea of using mind body practices, yoga, I mention a lot because I'm a yoga instructor, but of course, there could be other practices that you use. I'm also a transformational coach with a mind body coaching training that has helped me to put the knowledge of both of those things together, the yoga and the somatics, in a coaching capacity that I find is very helpful for myself, but of course for the people that I work with, for my clients. And when you embark on a process of wanting to refill yourself and refuel yourself, it's important to also fix the leaks, right? So if your nervous system is running on overdrive and you're stressed out all the time, it's using up a lot of energy. So the first thing that we do when it comes to increasing vitality truly is to stop the drains, to stop having your energy be drained out by things that aren't necessary. So, where stress is a fact of life, there was no way of getting around it. It exists everywhere. It's how you respond to it that makes all of the difference. And that is about nervous system training. That's about self regulation. And that's what these kinds of mind body tools help you to do. So, when we start with that basis of safety and security, we move out of survival mode. And that's where we can start to nourish ourselves with the things that are going to lead us into more of self actualization and creative potential. And where mind body practices and, practices that are considered a bottom up approach as opposed to a top down approach. And generally, what that means is going in through the body, through the nervous system to then make changes on the mind, as opposed to a more cognitive approach where you go in through the mind to try to influence behavior. These kinds of practices use our body wisdom to recalibrate our energy. So everything is about energy, right? The food that we eat gives us energy. When we move, we expend energy. Light bulbs are, light up a room because of energy, and the sun shines, that's energy. I don't have to explain it more than that. It's really a principle of nature, right? And so, as beings of energy, we have a certain amount of access to that kind of energy, which in turn gives us vitality and creative power. And when we find ourselves being more aware of our bodies rather than our minds, I mean, our minds use up a lot of energy too. But if we go in through the body, we notice sometimes that there are compensation patterns, like very tangible physical compensations that we do because of past traumas, because of lived experiences. For example, if you had an injury and your body decided to create inflammation around the injury, it's a means of protection. And then you perhaps are a little bit more stiff in that area of your body because it's a form of immobilization. Why? Because you need to heal. That's important. It's functional. It makes perfect sense. But after the injury is healed, sometimes the body hangs on to that structure. It hangs on to that older way of being that at one point was really useful, but now is no longer useful. So, mind body practices help us to cultivate this awareness and this wisdom to be able to say, I feel this. I honor that my body gave me this gift, gave me this protection, this ability to survive and to move beyond and grow. But now I have outgrown it. And it's time for me to let it go and replace it with something better. So, this idea of resource management, again, very clinical terms, but I'm a practical witch, and I like to make things make sense, and I also like to have a lot of faith and believe in things, and I want to talk to you about my beliefs in just a minute. But the idea of reallocating your energy into the things that are useful and promote growth is what this show is all about. It's what the whole concept of contain her magic is all about. So creating a strong container, be it mental, emotional, or physical, and filling that container with that which serves us and casting away that which no longer serves us. So in the idea of physical container, it could be, as I mentioned, compensations, patterns, ways that we move, that we can improve upon. In yoga, we do a lot with alignment. This is helpful, but creative movement as well to get out pockets of stress, and just to generally make your body feel better and more balanced. Emotionally speaking, sometimes we hang on to old emotions that even don't belong to us. And it's good to take a look at that. And our body hangs on to these emotions in different areas of our body. So going in through that pathway helps us sometimes to make this realization, particularly where we've had trauma, so that we don't have to relive it in a cognitive kind of storytelling way. The body communicates in a different way. And by listening to the whispers of your body, it can really help us to liberate the other parts of our being. So, there's, as I mentioned, an emotional container, a mental container, and that one's oh so important as well, to start to have a little bit of a discipline around what kinds of thoughts do I want to entertain? What kinds of thoughts are loving and useful and serving towards me or towards someone else? And what kinds of thoughts are holding me back, are negative, are in fact draining my energy? These are all things to consider. But I'd like to go back for a moment about my thoughts in terms of what do I believe? Because what you believe largely shapes who you are. Maybe you've heard this quote before that's it's a Mahatma Gandhi quote, which is your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. And another way to look at destiny, it could be your destiny, your legacy, what you create, what you leave behind. And that's also a very important thing to consider that I'm going to get back to in a minute. But back to what I believe. And I'd be really interested in knowing what you believe. Again, if you want to leave me any kinds of comments in the comment section after the show notes, that would be wonderful. Your feedback is so valuable to me. So I believe in celebrating life through all its phases. Every phase of life is important to our evolution. I believe in honoring the cycles of nature and leaning into their wisdom. I believe in the value of sharing our stories, like I'm doing today. I believe in listening to your body, to your intuition, and to your heart. I believe in pursuing your passions and following your bliss. And I believe in magic. So that's why I called this podcast Contain Her Magic, because I believe that magic is everywhere. And magic is very much that special energy that you see sometimes in children, in people who are lit up by their own creative fire. Magic is love. Magic is that energy that is inspirational to other people, that energy that supports the inspiration of others as well. So, there's a very um, powerful thing to be an inspiration to others because you're inspired yourself. Um, the reason that containing your magic is magical is because when you do this for you, when you hold that special and unique flame inside of you that lights you up, that makes you feel alive and full of love, you radiate that out to the world. And when you do that, other people are given the permission to do the same thing. So when you think to yourself, going back to, oh, I don't have time to invest in myself to do this or to do that because it would be unfair to someone else, get that out of your head right now. When you feed your fire, you light the way for others. And that's what this is all about. Being an inspiration to others helps to increase our collective vibe. So, as women, sharing our stories, sharing our desires and our passions and the things that are holding us back and the things that we'd like to change in our lives, but doing it in a way that's loving and caring towards each other is absolutely magical. It is absolutely um, soul igniting, and it's what lights me up. And that is really the essence of this podcast. So practical side is containing enough energy inside of your strong, solid body, mind, emotional self to be able to then radiate and shine a light out to the world and for others. And if that's not your thing, that's not your calling to be of service to other people, it doesn't have to be. It's just that it'll end up happening anyway. It's like when people go into yoga sometimes and they say, well, I'm just here because I want to be more flexible or I need to work on my balance. And I say, yes, of course, come on in. And I know that at the end of a certain amount of time, if they stick with it, if they're consistent, if there's a discipline behind their intention, that other results will happen. They will grow, they will change. And that same person may come to me, a few months later and say, wow, my relationships have healed. I came in to be more flexible, but as it turns out, flexibility is what I needed in my relationship with others. So there's a relationship between sometimes what you embody and how you relate to the world, to others, and to yourself. So, as we change our bodies, we can change our lives. And that's why the somatic practices are my tool, my go-to for positive change. And also, as we share our stories, as I said, this is so important because we learn from other people's stories and we see where our stories overlap with theirs and that there's a lot of connection between people and we want to reduce isolation. But at the same time, we don't want to reinforce old stories that aren't useful. Old stories that just bring more of what you've already had into the future when change is what you're looking for, when you're looking for transformation. So, again, that's where mind body practices are very powerful because we don't have to entertain a story. We don't have to relive the past. We just have to make a space or a container to feel, to notice, to acknowledge, and then we move it. We move it out. We get it going. We put it to use. We give it a function. We can validate it as opposed to having it stay stuck inside of us. So we'll talk more about that in other episodes. But for today, I did want to touch on my mission and my vision as a coach. What is my coaching approach? And it's very much being a container. So, containing your magic inside of a space. It's about holding space for you to transform, for you to evolve. And I was working with a client just this week who said that very thing to me. And I was so happy to hear her say that. She says, I wouldn't do this on my own. Even though I have all kinds of skills and I've read books and I've taken other kinds of courses and trainings and therapies, I know that on my own, I won't do it. I won't consistently offer myself the time and the space for growth and healing, which of course lead to transformation. And so that's what is also very important about the notion of the container. And as a coach, I obviously guide, but my guidance is based on what I see in other people. I'm there as a witness to healing, a witness to somebody's process. And there's so much goodness that can come from that just by being seen, just by being held, just by being supported. So that's my approach when it comes to coaching and to working with people. And it's also what I like to impart through this podcast, that this podcast is a container for this people witnessing each other, growing, learning from each other, being held in a safe space to be able to reclaim your spark and to really fuel all of that creative energy that you have to have your fire burning bright again, but in a way where you're not going to burn out. So, self knowledge is the key, and having a strong container to hold all your energy is the way forward where you'll be able to maintain your creative energy, maintain your desires to move in the directions that you would like to, in whatever spheres you want to, but at the same time, have it held in a way that is balanced, in a way that nourishes you and that gives you energy back, as opposed to having it taken away. So, what you can expect from this podcast and future episodes are stories and conversations, reflections about embodied living, about reclaiming your spark, about living your truth, and allowing your creative fire to burn bright. Mind body wisdom and somatic tools for sustainable energy are going to be key in this podcast and in future discussions, as well as pathways to creative freedom and grounded self expression. And my hope is that every episode helps you to reclaim your light, your spark, and remember that your creative fire was never lost, only waiting to be tended. And in keeping with that, I'd like to offer you a practice. As I record this podcast, there is crescent moon on the rise. So the new moon was a few days ago, and when there is that first little sliver of the crescent moon that appears, I find that to be a very magical time. For many, many years now, I've been making wishes on the crescent moon. The reason is that it's the new moon, it's the time to plant seeds, but with just a little bit of light, a little glimmer of what's to come, which is that fully radiant and mystical magnetism of the full moon. It's a great time to make a wish, to plant the seeds of your intention, of your desire, and then to let it grow into fruition with the changing cycles of the moon. And what's magical and powerful about making a wish on the crescent moon is that the crescent moon isn't going to stay. There's movement. Soon it'll be a half moon, and then the full moon, and then the waning moon, and so on. So it's got a cycle, and you just have to catch it at the right time. So when you look up in the night sky and you see it, it's a reminder for you to affirm your desire or to reaffirm your wish. And you don't have to hang on to it. You don't have to write it in your agenda. It's a magical messenger that says, the time is now. And then you can surrender it. Then you don't have to think about it anymore. And there is also power and magic in doing that. Surrendered manifestation is a concept that I've been studying, but actually have understood, I think, for quite a few years now. And it's the idea that there is something bigger than ourselves operating in the universe. And that I think it's akin to the idea of belief and of faith, that if you have an intention, you use your words, you make that intention clear, and then you give it up to the universe. You give it up to the powers that be. Sometimes you can be very happily surprised with what comes to you. And it's also a way for you to not have to stress about it. It's the crescent moon. Amazing. I'm going to make my wish and let it go. So if there's still a crescent moon when you're listening to this podcast, then I'd like you very much to make a wish and send your beautiful intentions out into the universe so that they can manifest. And if not, there's the power of visualization. You can close your eyes and visualize, imagine crescent moon and make your wish and offer it up to the divine cosmos. So stay tuned until the end of this episode, and I will guide you in a visualization meditation that's going to help you to manifest your desires. So, the cycles of the moon are very much tied into women's health and women's wisdom and are part of the cycles of nature. And as I mentioned, I believe in the cycles of nature and leaning into the wisdom that each carries. And right now, we are at the end of October, and it is definitely the witchy season. And I absolutely love it. And if you're like me, you love it too. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to feel a little more lethargy in the springtime and a little more bounce in the fall. So I don't know what that says, but here we are. And I think it's this energy that has inspired me to begin this podcast. Just as the crescent moon is a symbol, there's a lot of symbols that are also associated with magic and witchcraft. One of them is the pentagram. So, pentagram has got, or the pentacle has gotten some pretty bad press. There's some bad raps about what it represents. And I'd like to clarify that because it's part of my Contain Her Magic logo. There is an apple that is cut a certain way that when you look at it, you can see that there is the shape of a pentagram in the middle. And if you cut any ordinary apple, you will see the same thing. But the pentagram has been used as a symbol of devil worship. But oh, no, 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 pussycat, it is not that. If you flip it up so that you have the point pointing to the heavens, then the other points, the other 4 points, represent the material world and the elements. And what it is the material supporting the spiritual, supporting the soul. When you flip it around, it is the inverse. It is the soul being oppressed by material things. But just like anything else, it's all in the way you look at it. So when you change your perspective or slice your apple in a different way, your entire being can shift. The way that you see the world and you interact with the world can shift. So the apple is also a symbol of knowledge. Of course, we all know this. Naughty, naughty Eve bit into that apple. But really, it is a symbol of wisdom. And so for me, this is a very powerful thing to add wisdom with health. It's the idea that an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but also that inside of that body wisdom, there is the wisdom to support the other things, which are your spiritual health, your soulful desires, and of course, your mental and emotional bodies. So I'd like to continue talking just a little bit more about this witchy season in that the history of Halloween explains that this is the time of year where the veil between the worlds is its thinnest. So it's All Hallows Eve, perhaps you know the story, where there is a very, very thin veil between the world of the dead and the world of the living. And it's said that ghosts and ghoulies can easily cross over into our world, which is why we dress up like them to walk among them. And we put out Halloween candy because it's in reference to appeasing the trick-or-treaters, but actually it's appeasing the spirits, the ghouls, the malevolent souls that come knocking at your door. It's also a tradition, particularly a Celtic tradition, to set place at the table for someone in your family who is amongst the dearly departed and invite them to sit with you and share a meal. So it's actually really beautiful thing when you consider it's honoring the past. And symbolically, we can do this at this time of year. Summertime is coming to an end if you're in the northern hemisphere like I am. And it's a time for closing down the gardens, for putting things away and preparing for the long winter. I'm here in Canada, so winters tend to be pretty long. And it's a time for reflection. It's a time to look at the year that's passed and to start planting the seeds now for the year to come. We celebrate New Year's in January, but if you look again at the cycles of nature, this is really the end of our agricultural year, the things that bring us sustenance and nourishment, and we're preparing for the new year. So it's a good time to consider, what we would like to achieve in the next cycle of our life, and also what are the things that we no longer need and no longer want. So it comes back to the idea of what do you want to put in your container, and in this case, in your cauldron. I was having dinner with a very good friend of mine last night, and we were laughing over the idea of our life experiences and how it's like we've thrown everything into a cauldron. We've taken the good, the bad, the spectacular, the humdrum, the things that we'd rather not repeat, and the things that we are proud of and that we have accomplished. And we've thrown it all into this massive cauldron and we've let it bubble and boil and churn and burn and do its thing. And all the steam leaves it until it's boiled down to the essence of our experience. And we're both at this early crone, young crone stage of our lives. And it's a time of reflecting on the other cycles, on the maiden and the mother, and taking the experiences from those times in our lives and getting the richness out of it, getting the best out of it. And that means looking at all of it, putting it all together and saying, who am I now? And what am I going to do with it? And we're really excited about that. And then we went and watched Practical Magic because it's an awesome Halloween movie. And it actually is really good in terms of looking at planting seeds and casting out intentions to the universe and seeing what comes back to you. Well, during our discussion, we really landed on a lot of common points that we are at a point where we can choose, where we can take the essence of our lived experience and celebrate it, and then make a really awesome soup out of it that we want to eat. Okay, so let me explain what that means if you're not too sure. It's that we can add energy to it. We can add some more water to what we've boiled down, to what we've distilled after years of experience of living, of learning, of trying and trying again, of change, of personal growth. And then we can make the rest of our lives really, truly reflective of who we want to be, what we want to embody, and the legacy that we want to leave. Now, we've still got lots and lots of living to do. Believe you me, we're full of beans. But that's just the idea is that if you're like me and my very good friend, and you find yourself at the stage where you've lived a lot of your life, but you've got so much more life to live, that it's very inspiring to choose to make the next phase, the next steps of your life in line with your true self, with your true essence. And you are the sum total of your experiences and your beliefs and your desires. So take that forward with you with wisdom and with strength from your lived experience and choose to create the life of your dreams. And of course, late autumn and Halloween is associated with witches, witches that are wise women. Another way to say that is the crone. So again, the crone is a symbol of a woman who is no longer in her creative capacity to bear children and is beyond her maiden years by many a decade. And with her comes lots of wisdom. And next week, we're going to explore the wisdom of the crone in a very special interview with a very special woman who has inspired me. Her name is Joan Matthews. She is a yoga teacher and an elder in our community, and I can't wait to share her story with you. As I mentioned earlier, I would share a practice, a visualization practice with you to help you to manifest your desires. And so now we come to the end of our first episode of Contain Her Magic. And this is my offering to you, my lovely listener. All right, gorgeous. Take a seat in a comfortable chair, or you could lie down if you'd like to, if you have the space to do so. Offer yourself this moment of relaxation and grounding and visualization. So get comfy. If you're sitting in a chair, make sure your feet are resting on the ground and the backside of your body is resting in the support of the chair. If you're lying on the ground, then be comfortable, be warm, and close your eyes. Breathing in and breathing out. Just feel the rhythm of your breath, feel the flow of your breathing. Feel the movement of your body as you breathe in and you breathe out. Feel the whole backside of your body grounded and supported. Feel the whole front side of your body breathing, receiving, open, spacious. As you continue to breathe in and to breathe out, visualize in your mind's eye that space between your eyebrows, the crescent moon. Crescent moon in the night sky. As you look upon the crescent moon, Take a moment to think of something that you're grateful for. Bring gratitude into your wish. Now harness the emotion of that gratitude, of that person, place, thing, event, situation, moment in time that you are grateful for. How does it make you feel? As you continue to breathe in and to breathe out, feeling supported, feeling grounded, feeling spacious, feeling that emotion, that pleasant emotion of gratitude, or whatever it is for you, I'd like you to now say your wish. What do you wish for? And if it's in the realm of personal transformation, use a statement that starts with, I am, and the thing that you would like to be, or the person that you would like to be. Holding the power of that positive emotion. Repeat your wish 3 times. As you continue to breathe in and to breathe out, just notice how you feel in your body. Notice if there are any positive sensations that come up for you, and anchor into those sensations as well. So feeling your positive emotion, your positive thought, and your positive sensations. Rest here for a moment longer. Fully embody the essence of your wish. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. Thank you so much for being part of this first episode of Contain Her Magic. And I sincerely hope that you feel connection to what I've said today, to my story, and to the message and the intention of this podcast. So if you enjoyed it, please share with others who you think may enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to learn more about my transformational coaching and yoga programs, please feel free to contact me. You can get all the information on how to do that on my website at soniabaillon.com. That's SoniaBaillon.com. Well, my lovelies, I hope you feel uplifted and inspired. Remember, your fire is sacred. Hold it, nurture it, and let it light your path without burning out. And I hope that you'll join me for the next episode of Contain Her Magic, a sacred space to honor your path, discover your unique gifts, and to unapologetically embody your truth and your joy. I'm Sonia Baillon. Until next time, burn bright and hold on to your magic.